Amar Abaye. We're on the bottom of Lamed Chesem Abayz. We're just going to chaz the last 4 lines over there. Amar Abaye. Ba aleha v'meisa pater. If a person comes upon a nara and then she dies, so he's pater. Again, the pasuk tells us, in terms of an onus, we're going to discuss onus and mefata today. Raping her, and not raping her, mefata would be seducing her, where, quote unquote, the relations were in agreement of her. It's just that she was seduced and sort of not forced into them, but sort of forced without literally being forced. Onus is actual rape. So by rape, it says, Ki yimsa ish nara besula shelo rasa. He finds a nara besula who wasn't engaged, and he basically rapes her. He needs to give 50 kasef to the father, lo with a vav, and he needs to take her as a wife. He's stuck with her his whole life, except the father, as we'll see, the father and the daughter have the right to say no. So, Amar Abaye, let's say he raped her, and then she died. Before they were able to bring him to court and make him pay this knas of 50 kasef to the father. So pater, he doesn't need to pay the knas. Why? Shenemar v'nasan la'avi hanara, because it says in the pasuk that you need to pay to the avi hanara, v'lo la'avi mesa, not to the father of a person who's dead, and therefore he gets away with murder over here, even though he didn't murder her. Even though it is possible v'mesa that she died as the emotional trauma of being raped. But v'nasan la'avi hanara v'lo la'avi mesa. That's what Abaye says. He doesn't need to pay because logistically the pasuk says you only give to the avi hanira, not to the avi mesa. On the bottom of Lamed Chesem Beis, the last few lines. Milsa de pshita le'labaye mivar le'larava. Rava says it's not true. He needs to pay. The question only is, who does he pay? Again, he rapes her while she's a naira. She needs to be a naira, as we'll see, between 12 and 12 and a half, because that's what the pasuk says. If she's under 12 or over 12 and a half, there's no payment here. It's not this parsha. But he rapes her when she's 12. And now they don't bring him to court, or they're not able to get the verdict until she's after 12 and a half. So what happens? Again, she's dead. But she would be 12 and a half. Deboy Rava, yesh beggar bekever or ain bagger bekever? Is there bagger bekever or is there not bagger bekever? Again, bagger, bagrus, is after she reaches 12 and a half. And we know that the halach is, and we'll see it again, that once she reaches 12 and a half, if they didn't get her to court, again, they didn't get the guy to court and she's still alive, and now she reaches 12 and a half, who gets the money? She does. If they go to court and everything happens between 12 and 12 and a half, it says in the pasuk it goes to the Avi Naira. If they don't go to court and get him to be guilty until she's 12 and a half, she gets the money. So now the question is, who gets the money? Again, she died. They brought him to court after he's 12 and a half. So if you say, Ein beggar bekever, i.e. she doesn't age while she's in the kever, even though theoretically if she was still alive now, she would be 13. So then what? So then it doesn't matter at the time that she died, she was 12 and a half, and who gets the money? Really, she should get it, but now the father gets it. But if you say, yesh beggar v'kever, that she does grow up in the kever, so then who should get the money? So now she should get the money. Again, ein beggar v'kever, I want to say, I'll make sure I said that right. Ein beggar v'kever, she never grows up in the kever. Once she died at 12 and a half. Doesn't matter that they're doing the thing now. L'maisa, they pay the father. But if you say yesh beggar v'kever, then it would be the equivalent of she was still alive. And if she was still alive at the age of 13, then they would give it to her. Who do they give it to now? Who are her descendants. So the boy Rava yesh beggar v'kever, ein beggar v'kever. Even yesh beggar v'kever utibnahave. If you say that she continues to grow older while she's dead, so then when the verdict comes down at the age of 13, it belongs to who? It belongs to her, because if she was alive, then she would have been bagrus, and therefore she would have gotten it, and now since she can't get it, her descendants get it. O dilma ein beggar v'kever, or there's no growing older in the kever, and therefore he needs to pay because the Maisa is found guilty. Who should it go to? If she was alive, she would get it, but now that she's not alive, and she died before she was 12 and a half, so now it would go, and it would go to the father. So the Gemara says, Umima Abra. So that's the Gemara's question. Beautiful. Barsha Kivanta. So the Gemara says she has a kid. The question is, Umima Abra. Is it possible, it's not clear from this relation, maybe not, but Umima Abra, is it possible for a woman who died, again, she died before she reached 12 and a half. Is it possible for a girl before she reached 12 and a half to have had a kid? V'atani Rabbi become a Rav Nachman, Shalosh Nashim Mishamashas B'moch. There are 3 women who are allowed to use birth control. They're allowed to use a cloth in order to make sure that the zera of the man doesn't go ahead and impregnate them. Eluhain, Ketana, a Ketana, who seemingly, again, can get pregnant, as we'll see. Ume Uberes, somebody who's a nurse, who's pregnant. Ume Nika, fascinating. Somebody who's pregnant can actually get pregnant again. Ume Nika, somebody who is nursing. Ketana Shemet Tisaber Vitamut. A Ketana can go ahead. It's interesting. We always think that twins are from one bia. It sounds like in the Gemara over here that twins might actually be from two separate bias. Again, I don't know scientifically if that's true, but it sounds like in the Gemara here that a woman who's pregnant can actually become pregnant again. Ketana shemet tisaber v'tamut. Why can a ketana who seemingly is under 12, why can she go ahead and use a moch? Because if she gets pregnant, then she's going to die. She can get pregnant, but if she gets pregnant, she's going to die. Her body's not going to be able to make it through the pregnancy. Meuberes shematase ubrasandal. Meuberes, a person who's already pregnant, can use a moch because we're worried that she's going to become pregnant again, and the second baby is going to kill the first baby inside. Again, not literally kill, but kill because they're fighting for food and everything, and then they'll both end up dead. Menika shemetigmal espana. And someone who's nursing, we're afraid for her to get pregnant, and she could use a moch, because if she becomes pregnant, she's going to lose all the milk that she has, and then we have to remember there was no Similac back then. There was no formula, and therefore the baby might die. Chas v'shalom. Ve'ezui ketana. What's a ketana? Mibar achadas reishana v'yom echad ad shtemes reishana v'yom echad. Until, basically, it's up until 12. But over here, for our purposes, we're saying from 11 to 12. Pachas mikan v'yeter al kei mishameshes kedarka ve'oleches divrei Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir says that less than 12, less than 11, and more than 12 can go ahead and have shimush. Why? Because less than 11, he holds, it's just a logistic thing. Logistically, less than 11 can't even become pregnant, so nothing to worry about. More than 12 can become pregnant and can handle the pregnancy. 11 to 12 can become pregnant but can't handle the pregnancy. And therefore 11 to 12 is when she should not have relations without a moch. And Chachamim say no, even the 11 to 12-year-old can go ahead and have bia without a moch, because at the end of the day, if you do what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to do, so shomer petayim, those who are simple, God will watch over. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will make sure to watch over her. So now, what's the case over here again? If she had relations before 12, so we're saying before 11 she can't even become pregnant, but before 12 she can become pregnant but she will die, and after 12, so seemingly she can become pregnant and have the baby. So v'chitema di'abar kshinara, so the only way for her to really become pregnant and have a baby is when? After 12. So what happened in this case? Again, she was raped sometime between when she was 12 and 12 and a half, and she also died sometime before she was 12 and a half. So what happened here? How is it possible that she's going to have a descendant, as you asked? If she became pregnant while she was a naira between 12 and 12 and a half, either from this rape or from something before the rape, ve'olida, again, seemingly it actually, interesting, I'm just thinking now, it can't even be from before the rape, because if it was before the rape, so then it wouldn't be a naira who's a besula, and then there would be no knas. Right? The Gemara, the pasuk says, Ki yimsa ish nara besula. If she's a besula, that's when he's chayav for the onus. So if we're talking about the onus, and he's talking about giving the guy a knas, I just realized this. I don't know if the Rishonim say this, but seemingly she didn't have bia, and she actually became pregnant from this onus, from this rape. So let's say she became pregnant from the rape, and let's say she was even raped on the day that she turned 12 in one day. Again, because if she was raped the day before she turned 12, seemingly she's not going to have the baby because she's going to die from the pregnancy. If you say that she was raped and she had the baby before she died, because again, she died before she was 12 and a half, is it possible for a woman to give birth in 6 months? And we know the difference between Nairis and Bagris is only 6 months. And since we're discussing here that she was raped in Nairis, and now the only discussion is, what do we do now that he wasn't brought to court until she was a Bogera 6 months later? So, what are you going to do? No, maybe you'll explain that when it says that there's no difference between Nairis and Bagris except 6 months. It really means it can't be less than 6 months. Hatfeyika, but it could be more than 6 months. Ha'ella kamer, it says the word Ella. So there's only 6 months between Nairis and Bagris. And therefore it's impossible for this woman to have been raped while she was 12, have the baby before she was 12 and a half, and die before she was 12 and a half. Mm-hmm. So what does it mean that if you say yesh bagris bekever, that she grows older in the kever? Now when the guy's found guilty when she would have been 13 because she died at 12 and a half, so now her descendant's going to get the money. What descendant is there? There is no descendant. Elahachi kami baile. So really, what's the question? The question is not whether she's going to get the money, i.e. her descendant will get the money, or the father will get the money. The question is, when she's raped between 12 and 12 and a half, and then she dies, and the guy is not accused in court until after she's 12 and a half, the question now is, outside, whether the father will collect or will not collect. collect. If it was a regular case and now she's 13, so then who would collect? She would collect. But in this case, there's nobody to collect for her, so nobody collects. But in the case where, if you would say, Ein Baga Bekever, that she doesn't grow older in the kever, that means Lamaisa, they're bringing her to court now, but Lamaisa, it's going on the fact that she was between 12 and 12 and a half, and who gets the money? The father will get the money. Does she grow older in the kever, and therefore the father loses his right to this payment? Or do we not consider her to be growing older while she's in the kever, and therefore even though now the guy's brought to court and he's accused when she would have been 13 or 14, Lamaisa, she stays the age that she was when she died, which was between 12 and 12 and a half, and therefore you follow what the pasuk says, that it goes la'aviha nara. Marbar Ravashi boy lehachi, he asks a similar thing just in a different way. Mesa osebagris or ain't osebagris? Does Mesa make her a bogeris or not? I.e., can she become a bogeris after she dies? Teku tishbi yitaretz kusha sebayos. Put that on the list of things to ask Eliyahu when you see him. Bayimine Rava me Abaye. We ask, Rabba asks Abaye again. Abaye is the one who originally said it's pashut, that the guy is pater after she dies, no matter what. Whether you say yesh bag or sein bag, it doesn't matter. It says v'nasan lavia naira. Rav is the one who's going back and forth and saying that if you say yesh versus ein, so then maybe a father would or wouldn't collect. But now he has a related question. Ba'amine Rava me Abaye. Ba'alev is arsamahu. You Abaye said that if the woman dies between 12 and 12 and a half, so now there's no collecting because it's v'nasan laviha nara. So let me ask you another question. Let's say he rapes her, and then she gets engaged. Okay, again, this all happens, she gets engaged before the guy is brought to court. V'nis arsamau. So what happens? Amar le miksiv v'nasan laviha nara sher la'arusa. So let's say she gets raped at 12, she gets married, she gets nis arzes, she gets engaged at 12 and a quarter, and the guy's brought to court before she's 12 and a half, so who gets the money according to everyone? The father gets the money. So the question is, should the father get the money or not? Well, what's the kasha? Does it say you only give it to the father of the nara who's not arusa? No, you give it to the father of the nara. Whether she gets engaged or not, the father of the nara gets it. But according to you, but you have to agree with me, because everyone agrees that if she's raped at 12, and she gets married at 12 and a quarter, then she gets to collect the money even if it comes before she's 12 and a half. Even though in a general case, before 12 and a half, if the money's collected, so then it would go to the father. If she gets married between 12 and 12 and a half, so then it would actually go to her. Again, it goes to her for sure after 12 and a half, if they don't collect till after 12 and a half, assuming that she's still alive. But even between 12 and 12 and a half, if she gets married after the rape, so then she collects it.
What do you mean by married? You mean heiress?
So it's interesting. No. We just said heiress is the kasha. V'nises.
She can't get married before that because she has to wait 3 months to see if she's pregnant.
Well, she can get married to this guy, no?
After 3 months.
What does she have to wait 3 months? She's not. What do you mean? She doesn't wait at all.
Huh?
No.
She has 6 months being an hour, right? So if you got
she has 6 months, first of all, between. But
after 3 months,
she happens to have 6 months, and you could also argue that she's marrying this guy.
The guy who raped her.
The guy who raped her. Again, he needs to marry her as long as she agrees. So let's say she agrees to marry him. So that's it.
And there's no question.
So then they get married right away. So now for sure she gets the money. Interesting.
I thought we're talking about she's marrying someone else, though.
It could be. No, Pashtus is that she marries someone else. But even if she's marrying somebody else, she gets raped when she's 12 in a day. 12 and 3 months she waits. She goes ahead and she gets married. And now they bring him to court at 12 and 5 months. And now who gets the money? So everybody agrees that she gets the money when she gets married. The question is...
She wouldn't be married before 13 and a quarter. That's what I'm saying.
What are you talking about? She's 12.
The math is
she gets raped at 12 and 1 day.
3 months.
She waits 3 months until she's 12 and 3 months.
And she waits a year before.
Forget about heiress. So she's doing it at one shot under the chuppah. Heiress and kedushin. Fine.
have to wait a year.
Kinnis kasha is on that. You don't have to wait a year. That's what they used to do. So they did heiress and kedushin. So the question is, let's say that they just did the heiress. So that's the kasha. If she does the nesuin, then the guy's found guilty even before she's 12 and 6 months. She gets the money. The question is, if she does it heiress, so you just told me that he still gets the money, the father. But it doesn't say v'nasan lavia nara only if she's not nesua, and yet we know that she gets the money if she gets married. So maybe when it says v'nasan lavia nara, it means dafka if she doesn't get engaged. Hachi hashta hasam hoelu bagros Motzia Merishuzav and Nisuin Motzian Merishuzav, Ma Bagras Baaleh Bagar La'atzma, Af Nisuin Baaleha, Venises La'atzma. Ela Erisin Mikamaf, Gemerishusa de Avlagamre, Hadhanan, Nara Mirasa Vio Bala, Mafirin Lanidarel. So what's it saying? You're saying no. There's an essential difference between her getting married and between her becoming a bogeres. Again, the given so far is that if she gets married between 12 and 12 and a half, or he doesn't go to court till after she's 12 and a half and she's a bogeres, so she gets the money. The question that we're trying to figure out is what happens if she gets engaged between 12 and 12 and a half. So we want to say, just like if she gets married between 12 and a half, just like if she doesn't get the money until after she's 12 and a half and she's a bogeres, so then she'll get the money. So too if she gets engaged. And then the Gemara says, no, there's a difference. The difference is that by nisuin and by bagrus, when she gets married or when she becomes 12 and a half, she's no longer in the rishus of the Av. The Av doesn't marry her off anymore. If she gets married, doesn't have any say. He can't be made for her nidarim. He can't go ahead and reverse the nidarim, the vows that she takes. And therefore, over there, once she gets married or once she turns 12 and a half, she gets the money. She gets the knas. But in the case of Erisin, even though she is partly in the husband's rishus, she's also still partly in the father's rishus. And that's what we ended with saying, Tna nara mirasa avio bala mefir in London. Both the husband and the father can annul the vows while she's still mi'urasa between 12 and 12 and a half. And therefore, says the Gemara, the father will still collect after, even if she gets engaged between 12 and 12 and a half. So it comes out, Lamaisa, she gets raped at 12 in a day, because again, if it's before 12, then there's no knas here at all, because it's only a nara besula who's not engaged. So she gets raped at 12 in a day, she gets engaged, the father still collects, assuming that they go to court before she turns 12 and a half. If she gets married or she turns 12 and a half, even if she gets married before she's 12 and a half, she gets a knas herself. Mash Nisan. The Mishnah says, again, Onus is when he actually rapes her, Mefata is when he seduces her, but the actual relations is quote-unquote consensual. The one who seduces a girl has to pay her 3 things, and the Onus who rapes a girl needs to pay her 4. We've been discussing the knas until now, the penalty. The mefata pays the boshet, he pays the embarrassment for seducing her, the pegam, the depreciation, which the Gemara will later talk about the difference of the value between a virgin and a non-virgin, u'knas, and the knas that he needs to pay her. Lititalo kesef. He needs to give her kesef yishko kemoar ha-betulos, like a regular betula would get. So those are the 3 things. Most of all have onesh and nosin etzatzar. And onesh, if you rape a girl, so not only do you need to pay the knas, the boshes, and the pagam, you need to pay the tsar, the pain also. So now the Gemara is going to ask, ma bein onesh and mefata. So what's the difference between onesh and mefata? So the first difference is what we just said. Ha-onesh nosin etzatzar, mefana eino nosin etzatzar. But the mefata, by the seduction, there is no tsar. There's just boshet, pagam, and knas. Ha-onesh nosin miyad, ve-mefata l'kishayotzi. The onesh pays right away, and the mefata pays when he divorces her. We'll see what that means. Ha'onesh shote ba'atzitzo. The one who rapes her is shote ba'atzitzo. He needs to sleep in the bed that he made. He needs to drink out of his pot. Why? Because he needs to marry her. But the mefata, the one who seduces her, has a right to go ahead and marry her, but doesn't need to marry her. Again, both the father, as we'll see, the father and the daughter can say no. In either case, even in the onus, and it's hard to understand why exactly a man, but it was clearly very difficult to get married back then, that a man or a daughter would be willing to marry a guy who just was ma'anis her, who just raped her. Especially if she was raped, then it would be very difficult for her to get married. So the onus, in the case of onus, he needs to marry her, and in the case of mefata, he has a right not to marry her if he doesn't want her and just pay her the knas. What does it mean he needs to drink out of his own cup or sleep in the bed that he made? Afilu hi chigeres, afilu hi suma, afilu hi mukashkin. If he rapes a woman who's lame, a woman who's blind, a woman who has boils all over her body, so Lamaisa, he's stuck with her. He needs to marry her. Nimsa ba davar erva. But if he finds her a davar erva, that she, quote unquote, let's say there's something, we find out that she was, or sheina ria love of Israel. Let's say we find out she was a mamzeres, or we see that she committed adultery or something. So Eina Rasha L'Kaim. And then not only can the guy who was Ma'anis her not allowed to, not only does he have a choice, he doesn't have a choice. Not only does he need to not marry her, he is not allowed to marry her. Shenamar Veloti El Isha, because it says in the Pasuk, Veloti El Isha, she needs to be a Risha for him. Isha Hari'u Elo. It needs to be an Isha that is fit for him, and she's only fit for him if she's not a Mamzeres and she wasn't Matzah Ba Ervas Davar.
The rapist is not allowed to marry this girl who has the...
He must marry the girl, he must marry the girl who's lame, who's blind, or who has boils. He's just not allowed to marry her if he's related to her, or if she's a mamzeres and she's not allowed to marry a regular Jew. But he must marry her otherwise, assuming that she agrees and the father agrees. Tsar demai. So what exactly is this pain that an onus pays? Again, besides for the embarrassment and the depreciation and the knas, what is this pain that a tsar? What is a tsar that a person who rapes a girl needs to pay? Amar avua deshmuel tsar shechavta al gabe karka. It's the pain of throwing her down on the ground. When you rape her, so you don't do it very nicely, you throw her down on the ground and you abuse her. Maskilo Reb Zera. Are you telling me elameata chavta al gabe shiran hachanami depater? You tell me that he throws her down on the bed and he rapes her on the bed or on soft grass and doesn't hurt her in the process, so he's going to be putter from this payment of tsar. He'll still have to pay the boshes, pegam, and kanas, but he'll be putter from the tsar. If you tell me yes, ein hachanami, it's only the tsar of throwing her down on the ground. Ve'atani Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda omer mishum Rabbi Shimon. We see the Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Shimon, Onus eino mishalim es hatzar, mipnei shetsofa lehistayer tachas ba'ala. Fascinating pshat. He doesn't need to pay her the tsar when he rapes her, because eventually she's going to have that tsar when she marries anyway. What does that seem to be talking about? What tsar is that talking about? Not the tsar of throwing her down on the ground. The tsar of the pain of having relations for the first time. Amrulo eino doma nivelas ba'ones l'nivelas baratzon. So they said back to him, what do you mean? They should have to pay the tsar when he's ma'anes her, because even though she's eventually going to have that pain when she has bia, when she gets married, the pain of an ones, the pain of rape, is not the same as the pain of doing it baratzon. And even though there's pain baratzon, as Tosfos explains, there's also a taiva baratzon, there's also an interest baratzon, so the pain whether it's actual pain or the fact that it's sort of minimized by the fact that she has interest in being with her husband, at the end of the day, it's not the same, and therefore the tsar that he needs to pay is the tsar of raping her. So again, either way, whether you say that he does in fact pay the tsar for raping her, or he doesn't pay the tsar for raping her, what do you see from this brisa? That they're arguing about the tsar, and what's the tsar by rape? The tsar by rape is not throwing her down on the ground. The tsar by rape is actually going ahead and the actual pain that she has from the bia. Again, one says that he doesn't have to pay that tsar because she would have it anyway. The other one says that he needs to pay that tsar because it's more harmful than it would have been if it would have been baratzon, willingly. But at the end of the day, we clearly see that neither one of them is suggesting that he needs to pay the tsar for throwing her down on the ground. So what does it mean over here that he needs to pay the tsar for throwing her down on the ground? Ella, so what's another interpretation? One interpretation is that the tsar he needs to pay is the tsar for the actual bia itself. Ella Amar of Nachman Amar Rabba Barafua, that a second interpretation of what the tsar he needs to pay is when he rapes her, is tsar shal pisuk haraglayim. The tsar, the pain, not for the bia itself, but the tsar, again, this is within the one who holds that you wouldn't pay for the tsar of the bia because you would have it with your husband anyway. The tsar of spreading of the legs. And again, the Meforshim seem to imply that when you have bia with your husband, so that's not going to be the same tsar of the spreading of the legs when it's done forcefully. But the tsar that she has from the spreading of the legs, even according to the Mendel who says that he wouldn't pay for the tsar of the bia because she'll have it anyway, he still needs to pay for the tsar of the spreading of the legs, the pain of the forcefully spreading of the legs when he goes ahead and rapes her. And she spread her legs for all those that pass by. But the problem is that you just said that only the rapist pays the tsar and the mefuta doesn't pay the tsar. So if you tell me that that's true, so the mefuta should also pay the tsar. The Gemara doesn't seem to be clear here under which Manda Amar this is, but it seems like you can learn this according to either one. If the tsar is actually the rape, the ones, or the pisuk raglayim, so then seemingly the mefuta should have to get the tsar too. But as we'll see in a second, Amar of Nachman Amar Baravua, no. Mashal de mefuta lamad davar. The reason that the mefuta doesn't get tsar, whether it's the tsar of the actual bia or the tsar of the spreading of the legs, is la'adam sh'amar lechaveiro kara shirayin shalivi fater. Because at the end of the day, it's as if I went over to you and say to you, come rip my shirt and you'll be pater. Well, you're pater because I told you to rip my shirt. So they're learning that the mefuta, even though she was seduced, at the end of the day, she agreed, quote unquote, willingly to have bia with him. So if she agreed to have bia with him, so then why should she get the tsar of the pisuk raglayim, of the spreading of the legs, or the tsar of the actual bia? L'maiseh, she was an active partner in the relations. So the Gemara says, Sheli de'avu aninu. The problem is, how can she go ahead and be mochel that tsar? Who gets the tsar of the onus and the mefuta? the father, again, unless she gets married, but in general, the mice in a regular case, who gets the tsar? The father gets it. So how can you say that the mefuteh, that the onus, the person who gets it, that they're going, or the mefuteh in this case is going to be mochel the tsar? Rather, we must say that the onus gets the tsar, but the mefuteh doesn't get the tsar because enachanami, she did it willingly. But we see lamaisa that she does have tsar. We do see Lamaisa that she does have tsar when she goes out and has a bia. Amar Abaye, Amar Liyem. So it's interesting. What does the Gemara mean when it says V'hakachazina de Isla? That she does have tsar. Sounds like she has actual tsar, but who cares? Why does that matter?
She regrets it.
Lamaisa, what?
Maybe she regrets it.
Maybe she regrets it. It doesn't sound like the Gemara is saying V'hakachazina de Isla that she gets the payment. It's that hachazinan that she had tsar, but l'mashal l'mad domer is that she did it on purpose. But l'maisa she has, even though she agreed, she had tsar. So why is she not paid for that tsar? Amar Abaye, no. Amar Liyem, you have the mitzias wrong. Amar Liyem, my mother told me, interesting conversation with his mother. Kimaya chamime areshe dekarcha. I guess you see that these are conversations that you should be having with your parents, the birds and the bees. He says that, and again, I wouldn't try this at home. It sounds like the pain of the spreading of the legs is kimaya chamime areshe dekarcho. Even if you want to say the pain of the actual bia with her is like pouring boiling hot water on a bald head, which is not too painful. Okay, don't try that at home. Not everybody can try that at home, but those who can try it at home, do not try that at home. Rava Amar, Amra li bas Rav Chisda ki rivda de kusilta. Rav Chisda says that it's like the puncture of bloodletting. Rav Papa Amar, Amra li bas Abba Sura ki dahama kusha bechinche. It's like the rubbing of hard bread on the palate, which is not too painful either. Either way, we see that why doesn't a mefate get the tsar payment? How could she go ahead and be mochel the payment which goes to her father? The Gemara seems to be concluding that the tsar that she has is not a real tsar. Again, it could be for different reasons. It could be because she actually agreed, but it doesn't sound like the Gemara is saying that because she agreed. Who cares that she agreed? It's not her money to agree to. But it's saying that it's seemingly the metzius is that the tsar, again, I don't know if it's working within the one that says of the bia, but definitely within the one who holds of the spreading of the legs, that the spreading of the legs by the mefuteh is not as painful as the spreading of the legs by the onus. By the onus, the spreading of the legs, she's mamish fighting. I mean, we can think about it. She's mamish fighting against a guy, and it's a whole fight, and when he spreads her legs, it really, really hurts. But at the end of the day, by the mefuteh, since it's seemingly somewhat consensual, if not totally consensual by that point, there is no pain by the spreading of the legs, and therefore there would be no tsar payment. And that's why there's a tsar payment by the onus, not by the mefuteh, but there would be the boshes and the pagam and the kanas by both. Weiter in the Gemara. We're just going to go to the bottom of it. We're not going to finish the parak. Rabbi Tuchiner said he will finish the parak tomorrow. So let's go to the 2 dots.
There's 2 pages of point.
Not the parak, I'm sorry. He'll start by the new Mishnah. I'm sorry. Don't correct me on tape, please. It makes me look bad. Ha'ones no sein miyad ha'mefate l'kishayotzi.
We're editing it, don't worry.
Oh, you can edit it. Okay, thank you. Okay. Ha'ones no sein miyad. We have some that we lost the tape. Ha'ones no sein miyad ha'mefate l'kishayotzi. So there's an interesting pshat in the Gemara here. So the Mishnah says that by the ones he pays her the knas right away. And by the mefate, he only pays her knas when he divorces her. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. L'kishayotzi ishtohi, is she his wife? She's not his wife yet. So what does the Gemara mean to say? Amar Abaye, ema l'kishelo yiknos. Again, interesting. The onus needs to go ahead and marry her right away. He needs to pay her the knas right away. The mefate, it sounds like, doesn't need to pay her the knas unless he doesn't go ahead and marry her. Very interesting. Likishelo yiknos. Tanya nami hachi. Afa pisha amru hamefata nokain. Kishelo likishelo yiknos. Boshet upegam notain miyad. Interesting. So the boshet and the pegam he gives right away. The embarrassment and the depreciation he needs to pay right away, even if he goes out and marries her. But the knas of a mefata he only needs to pay if he doesn't go ahead and marry her. Right, and that makes sense in the pasuk. I'm just looking at the pasuk here. If you look by the onus, it says Ki yimse ishnara b'sula shelorasa utfas v'shachav yima v'nimso. What does he do? He needs to pay the 50 kesef no matter what, and he needs to marry her. Again, if the wife says no or the husband says, it doesn't matter. If the wife says or the father says no, so he still needs to pay her. Then he just doesn't marry her. What does it say by the mefate? V'chiyifate ish betula shelo rasa v'shachav ima mahor yimarena lo leisha. If he wants, he takes her as an isha. Ima'ein yima'ein avia letita lo kesav yishko kamor habesulos. If he doesn't take her as an isha, then he goes ahead and has to pay her the money. But again, it comes out that by the Na'ara who's raped, she gets the money right away, regardless of whether she ends up with him or not. And the woman who is Mifata, who is seduced, so she only gets paid if he decides that he's not going to marry her. But if he's going to marry her, then he doesn't need to make the payment.
So in the situation where he marries her and he pays her, I don't understand. They don't have a joint bank account.
Again, so that would be a discussion of what kind of stuff is it considered. Is it considered the stuff that he's allowed to touch or not touch? That's by the onus. But by the mafata, the question over here would be, does she get the money or not? She only gets the money if he decides not to marry her. Ve'echad ha'ones ve'echad ha'mafata bein hi bein avia yichol lakev. Interesting. And both the onus and the mafata, either he or her father can say no. Again, by the mafata, we know for sure that what? The husband can say no, and now we're saying either she or the father can say no. Everyone can say no. By the onus, we know that he, the husband, can't say no, the one who raped her. But we're saying here that not only can she say no, her father can say no as well. Bishlama mefuta, I understand by the seduction case why both the father and the daughter can say no, because it says in the pasuk siv ima ein yimein avia. It has a double lashon of saying no. Ma'ain yima'ain. Ein li ala avia. Because in the pasuk it only says that the father can say no. Again, in both of the cases. Well, in the first case, it doesn't even say anything about the father saying no. But in the second case of the mefuta, it says ima'ain yimein avia. So ein li ala avia hiyatzma minayin tamalomar yimein mikol makom. That either she or the father or he can say no. Ella ones, but ones bishlama ihi ksiv. I understand why she could say no. Velo tiyeh midaita. Just like we said, velo tiyeh, it needs to be an isha haru'uya lo. It also velo tiyeh, it needs to be midaita. She has the right of refusal. Ella aviha minalan. How do we know that when she's that when she's raped? Again, the person who raped her can't say no. We know from velo tiyeh that she could say no. The question is, what about the father? You're telling me in the Brisa that the father can say no. Why can the father say no? Where does it say it in the pasuk? In the other pasuk, it says ma'ain yima'ain. She could say no, and the father could say no. But over here, where do you see in the pasuk that the father can say no when she's seduced? Rabbi shelo yehi chote niskar. He could say no based of svara that the guy will not end up benefiting from sinning. Why is it benefit from sinning? Because what happens before he goes ahead and rapes? What happens before he's mefut to her? The father has the right to marry him off to whoever he wants. So if he wants this girl and the father is not allowing her to marry this guy, so he's just going to go ahead and seduce her. When he seduces her, so now she's the only one who will be able to say no. She's not going to say no because he seduced her. She obviously likes him a little bit. And now the father is stuck because he can't say no anymore. So based on svara, that since the father could say no before the seduction, then by svara, the father can say no after the seduction, so that this guy who sinned doesn't end up gaining from the sin.
This is Onus.
What?
We're talking about Onus.
No, we're talking about onus. I'm sorry. Onus. We're talking about onus. Ela onus bishlama iksiv velotia midaita. Let's say that again. By mefate, by the seduction, we have that right away. We have that from the pasuk. By onus, so we know that she could say no, but why can the father say no by onus? Because what's going to happen? He's going to go and he's going to rape this girl. Now he needs to marry her. The girl can say no, but if the girl decides to say yes, so now the father's stuck. The father could have said no before, and now the father can't say no, and this guy's going to be gaining by going in and raping a girl who the father wouldn't have let him marry otherwise. Right, thank you. Rav Amar, it's the same svara, just Rav Amar kal v'chomer. Rav says no, it's a kal v'chomer. Why? Because again, we just saw in the pasuk that by a mefate, by the seduction, so the father can say no. Uma mefate shelo avrel al das avia bilvad bein hiu bein avia yicholin lakev. In the case of the seduction, where she did it quote unquote willingly, and he was only over the father, so then we know that both the father and the daughter can say no. Onesh over al das avia vadas atzmalo kol shekin kal v'chomer. That when he's over not only the das of the father, but he's also over the das of the girl by raping her. Then obviously, just like in the case of Mefate, where both of them can say no, then they should both be able to say no here as well. So let's just say why each one didn't say like the other one, and we'll conclude with this. Rava lo amar ke Abaye. Rava didn't say like Abaye that we don't allow. That we allow the father to say no because otherwise the guy will be gaining by raping the woman who the father would not have let him marry otherwise. Ravalo Amar Kabayi Kavan de Kamishalem Knas Lav Chote Niskarhu. Because the whole point is that Lamaisa he's gonna have to pay a knas. So he's not going to be a chote nisker. He's not going to be a guy who's sinning and getting money. He's not going to be a guy who's sinning and getting what he wants by sinning, because Lamaisa he's going to have to pay a knas. Now I would argue and say, what do you mean? Lamaisa is still getting what he wants. He's willing to pay the money to be with this girl. But it sounds like we can't can't consider him to be a chote niskar, or a guy who is niskar, or a guy who's gaining from it, because that implies a guy who gains at the loss of nothing. And over here he loses because he has to pay a knas. Interesting. Abaye, who says that the reason that the father can say no is so that this guy doesn't gain by being a sinner. Lo amar Rabbi doesn't say the kal vachomer because of the follows. Mefate deihu matzi ma'akev avir nami matzi ma'akev. By a mefate, look at it the other way. By the mefate, the guy who seduces her can actually say no, and therefore the father can also say no. But Onus deihu lo matzi ma'akev, by the case of Onus, where the guy who rapes her cannot say no, then avir nami lo matzi ma'akev. Very nice. You have a kal vachomer that way, but you also have a reason to say that the case of Onus should be stricter. Because since in the case of Onus, the guy himself can't say no, so then the father shouldn't be able to say no as well. But either way, both of them agree. Again, both of them agree that bein be'ones, bein be'mefate, the father and the daughter can say no. They all agree that by a mefate, the guy who seduces her can say no also. They're just arguing in svara why, in fact, the mefate, by the father, by the mefate, why the father can say no. According to Abaye, the reason the father can say no is so that the guy who was mefate her, by the case of the Onus, they're just arguing by the case of Onus why the father's allowed to say no. According to one opinion, according to Abaye, the father can say no by Onus so that the guy doesn't gain and be able to win from doing the sin, because now he can marry this girl who the father would never have allowed him to marry. And Rabbi says no, it's a kal vachomer, that since by mefate it was only over on the das aviyah because she consented to it, and both of them are allowed to say no. So too by Onus, where he's over everybody's das, so then for sure the father can say no as well. Tanya idach, we have another brisa. Afa pisha amru Onus no sein miyad kishayotzi hu eina lav klum. Interesting. We just said that an Onus pays right away, and again we said that by mefate you only pay the knas, we're talking about the penalty, you only pay if you don't marry her. But even though we said that an Onus pays right away, kishayotzi hu eina lav klum, that means the Onus pays her right away. Now what happens? Now she has a right to say no, the father has a right to say no, the guy has no choice. But let's say the daughter says no now. So does he need to pay her a ksuva now as well? So the Gemara says, the Brisa says you don't pay a ksuva as well. The knas is the ksuva. Kishayotzi mi matzi mafikla. What does it mean kishayotzi? He doesn't give her anything. He doesn't have the right to divorce her. Ema kishatetzehi. When she goes ahead and she says no, or she gets married, let's say she decides to marry the guy who rapes her for whatever reason, and then she says, I want a divorce, and he divorces her, or the guy even dies, as we'll see in a second maybe. So, ein la love klum. She doesn't get anything else. It sounds like the knas itself is like a prepayment of the ksuva up front. Meis, yatsa kesef kansa b'ksuvasa. Meis, so if he dies, so the kesef of the knas is the ksuva. Again, that's the same opinion. Rabbi Yehuda Mer, no, yesh la ksuva mana, that she gets a ksuva anyway. So again, what are they arguing about here? They're arguing about a case of Onus, where the guy raped her. The guy raped her and he pays her the knas right away, or pays the father knas right away. So it seems like one opinion holds that knas is going to be the ksuva. And if he ends up marrying her, if he doesn't marry her, she doesn't want to marry him, the father doesn't want her to marry him, so that's it. He gets the knas, the boshet, the pagam, and the tsar, and it's over. But let's say that he marries her, and now she wants a divorce, because again, he's never allowed to divorce her. But now she wants a divorce. If she wants out, so then he's allowed to get rid of her. Does he need to pay the ksuva again? According to the first opinion, he doesn't pay the ksuva. He already paid the ksuva when he gave the knas. According to the second opinion, he still needs to pay the ksuva besides the knas. Now, if they get divorced, or if he dies after marrying her, he needs to pay the ksuva. Why? What's the svara? So we'll end with this. B'mai kamiflagi, Rabbanan savrei, taima maitakina Rabbanan ksuva kadesh lo tehe kala be'enav lo tzia v'halo matzi mafikla. The Rabbanan who say what? The Rabbanan who say that she doesn't get a ksuva is because the whole purpose of Exuma is to prevent a husband from divorcing his wife. Over here, he has no option to divorce his wife, and therefore there's no ksuva. He pays a knas, he's married to her, he can never divorce her, and therefore there's no ksuva. Rabbi Yehuda Savarna. Hanami mitzar la da amrahi lo ba'ina lacha. No, you're right. Even though he's not allowed to go ahead and divorce her, he could do something else. What does he do? He can go ahead and make her life miserable. And if there is no ksuva, so what's going to happen? He's going to make her life miserable. Again, he had to marry her. He's going to make her life miserable so that she'll want to divorce him. She'll divorce him, and that'll be it. He'll be happy. If we make him pay a ksuva on top of the knas, so now you paid the knas, now you need to marry her, but now there's a ksuva as well. So you better be careful before you make her life miserable. You better take care of her, because if you don't take care of her, she's going to want a divorce. If she wants a divorce, you're going to have to pay her more money. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone.